Hello and welcome to this latest edition of Franchise Sports Talks Football. I'm your host, as always, Alen Ramic, coming at you with my co-host, as always, Luke Conboy. Luke, welcome to the show, sir.
Yeah, thank you as always, Alan. It's been an interesting week from my standpoint. I sit here in my abode in southwest London with a huge rainstorm outside. Bit of a sense of pathetic fallacy about this episode because, of course, Bill O'Brien no longer head coach of the Texans. One or two thoughts about him and just about the franchise in general. So it's been a busy week.
Before we go on to that, we have the matter of talking about the Thursday night football game that happened. Obviously, the Bears beat the Bucks 20-19. Two biggest takeaways from me here. On the Bears side, we'll touch on the Bucks later. Number one, is this the most improbable team to ever go 4-1 to start the season? And number two, has Allen Robinson been dealt the worst hand I've ever seen for a wide receiver in the NFL?
Yeah, right. Two very valid points. I think so. So the Bears now sitting at 4-1. I think they've won all their games by a combination of 5 points. Says it all. Here they are. They've won 4 games. So, and as you say, yes, touching on Allen Robinson. Of course, he's started off life with Jacksonville Jaguars. Blake Bortles, the quarterback there, comes to the Bears. They draft Mitch Trubisky, and now Foles has a starting job. So yeah, 3 guys there. He struggled to make anyone's list of top 20, even top 25 quarterbacks in the league.
And that's being generous. That's being really generous.
Yeah, I don't want to talk the guys down too much because obviously Foles, the Super Bowl winner and all that, and he managed to drag his team through the mire at times. But even so, it's not exactly. That's kind of more in spite of quarterback play rather than the talent. Definitely on the defensive side of the ball with Chicago, and obviously Allen Robinson being one of the better wide receivers in the league.
I just think in general they're a really talented, deep team, Chicago. I really think they are, apart from the quarterback spot. Like, there seems to be like a hint of Jacksonville this year. Like when Jacksonville got to the AFC Championship game, where they were really good in spite of quarterback play, not because of their quarterback play, if you know what I mean. Obviously, their defense is phenomenal. Khalil Mack leads that defense, and, I think he was worth that trade 10 times out of 10. Just because I think Khalil Mack is that good. I think their secondary is really good. I think their linebacker core is also, I think it rivals Seattle's for the best in the NFL, to be honest with you, and it's up there with the San Francisco 49ers. I think those are like the 3 elite linebacker groups in the NFL. It also, the biggest takeaway from me is I now feel like watching that game, 2 NFC contenders, quote unquote. I feel like the Packers and the Seahawks are currently so far ahead of all the other teams in the NFC. It's untrue. Before we touch on Tom Brady and whatnot and the mistakes he made, towards the end of the game, which was so unlike Tom Brady. And that was my biggest takeaway from the game. I feel like the Packers and the Seahawks have basically elevated themselves from everyone else so far to start this season.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you've got a decent sort of 4-5 game sample now. We sort of compare these teams. You think, yeah, it's true that Packers and Seahawks, they've got everything sorted out more or less on both sides of the ball. Obviously, a couple of question marks on the Seahawks defense still, but when you've got an elite guy like Russell Wilson, finally you've been allowed to cook, and then you're going to get results, So, and it's interesting. Yeah, now you think, do we see the Bears as being serious now in the NFC? They've got 4 wins under their belt. We've got a decent lead over the other teams in their division. So yeah, the Vikings having a bit of up and down time. The Lions, I don't think anyone's really taking them seriously, despite they've got some talent on that team, but I still think the defense is not really good enough to be in contention. So, of course, the extra playoff spot, it's not going to be a surprise now, is it? If we do see the Bears in the playoffs, but can they really go that far?
Well, if they do go far, I feel like the defense will propel them. I really do. I feel like they'll get a ton of turnovers. But then, like I said, against the likes of the Seahawks and the Packers, I still don't see them getting too far if they face either of those teams in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because I think that like we saw with Jacksonville, Like, when they faced the Patriots, the quarterback play was so the level in quarterback play was so big that it had an influence. Like the defenses, I think the Jacksonville defense was better, but it wasn't like it was a huge difference between the New England and Jacksonville defense to the point where it would make a huge difference in a game. But then when you look at the quarterback play, when you look at Bill Belichick over, God bless Doug Marrone, but he's not like a superstar level coach. But like, I want to touch on the Bucks, seeing as we touched on Brady just then. I think people are finally seeing Brady's age. The blip last week aside, where he threw for 5 touchdowns. But I don't know. You know me. I wasn't sold on this Bucks team before. Watching them through the first 5 games, I'm not any more sold on them. What do you make of this Tampa Bay team? I'm honestly like, I see him being a playoff team, and that's it. I see him getting bounced out in a wild card or maybe the divisional round, depending on how the seeding is.
Yeah, I remember, sort of talking, our sort of preseason predictions, and a lot of people were just chucking the Bucks into like the Super Bowl conversation. I was like, whoa, wait. Let's pump the brakes here. Like, sure, they've got Brady now and, Gronk, but where's Gronk's done nothing? He's more a blocker than, contributing in the passing. And obviously with O.J. Howard now, with his Achilles injury, he's going to see more, snaps and see the ball more thrown his way. But, they're just names. Like, obviously, you can't, you've got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. I think they're 2 very talented receivers.
Sensational, aren't
they? But apart from that, I think, Brady is, there was always talk of gradual decline over the year. Like, when will it come? When will it come? And I think last year, there was definitely signs of it. And the start of the season has only served to confirm, that theory that his, how, you start really questioning, okay, well, there will soon be, an NFL without Brady, and that time is coming soon. So, I think the Bucks, as you say, divisional at best, because I think you see the Saints in their division having their own issues. Another aging quarterback, perhaps Breeze's issues are even more, deep than Brady's. So I think obviously the Saints are missing their top receiver in the form of Michael Thomas now for a few games. So they've got their own, issues to deal with. So it's quite an interesting division in the fact that you think Panthers are in rebuild mode. No one's really thinking, okay, playoffs for them. Falcons, they can't defend to save their lives. Probably the worst defense in the league at the moment. So
with the Cowboys,
the Cowboys is a big shock in the moment. So you kind of say, well, you probably say the Bucks are the favourite to clinch the NFC South, but they're not exactly going to be taken seriously. I think, as we just mentioned, Packers and Seahawks being atop the NFC at the moment, I can't see the Bucks competing with them.
I have the Packers, the Seahawks. I probably have the 49ers in there when they're healthy. I think the 49ers, I think when they get healthy, if they get healthy, obviously, because they have lost Bosa and Thomas for the year. That is a huge miss because, political views aside is what I'll say about Nick Bosa, to put it nicely. An incredibly special pass rusher. Like, if we're going to talk about him just on football terms, he's a special player. As a human, not so special, but as that pass rusher, he adds. I know they're very deep in that pass rushing, but I watched Deion Jordan and Ezekiel answer for the Seahawks. They're not great.
You have experience there.
Like, they're bad enough to the point that the Seahawks let them go, and that's all I'll say. And we know how bad the pass rush in Seattle is right now. But going back to the Bucks, like, I think that is the moral of the story so far in the NFC South, is these aging quarterbacks. I'd even include Matt Ryan in there. I know he threw for a lot of yards against Seattle, but that was a lot of like late game yards. And I think Teddy Bridgewater looks like the best quarterback in the conference right now. And I think Teddy's finally getting used to the system that Joe Brady's wanting to run. I know he used it in New Orleans as well, so it's not that different. But when you're the top dog instead of the backup, it takes a lot of time to actually, get used to. And without any preseason games, well, I think that was huge. And just touching on the NFC South, like, I know I envisioned Breeze and Brady not being this good, but did anyone actually envision the cliff being this dramatic for both of them? Because, like, Breeze, he has no power left in that arm anymore. It's sad to watch, in my opinion. It really is.
No, yeah, there's no deep shots within that on that Saints offense, and there's always talk is always about, oh yeah, the 5-yard passes to Michael Thomas, blah blah blah, and people are like, oh, there's more to that than the Saints, there's more to that to their offense, but there's
Not right now.
There's not really, no. So that's take that out, and you've seen what's happened to the Saints. They're struggling. So yeah, it's been that's such a drop off, and I know we championed Jim and Jameis Winston so much on this podcast, and
I still believe.
Yeah,
I still believe.
And obviously, they've obviously got Taysom Hill in the building, but he's a gadget guy. I don't think you can really take him as a serious starting quarterback in the NFL. So Winston's probably the guy there. But yeah, it's just they have, I think, fallen off a cliff really is the right words, and it's not going to get much better before it gets worse.
No.
So these guys have a limit. Not going to in their 40s now. It's not as though they're going to find a new edge to their game. So it's a strange one. Like, you always think as years gone past, NFC South was one of the better divisions in the league. It's always competitive. It was quite when it came to calling divisional games, it was tough to call a winner. But now I think, as you say, touched on perfectly, Teddy Bridgewater is probably out of the 4 starting quarterbacks in the division, he's the one who's best placed at the moment to kind of take his team to the next level, because Brady and Breeze struggling there, and there's talk now of Matt Ryan. Is he kind of reaching his end of the time in Atlanta? Like, perhaps he needs to move to a new team to kind of find his spark again. But it's an interesting division. I didn't think we'd be sat here week 4, week 5 really just throwing this amount of shade on the NFC South.
Well, I've said it multiple times. The best quarterback in both, I think the best quarterback in the NFC South is the backup quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. People don't like hearing it because of the 30 turnovers, but the guy threw for 5,000 yards. Like, I'm sorry, but I understand the turnovers are big. If you look at any Bruce Arians quarterback in their first year in a Bruce Arians system, their turnovers are always big. Look at Tom Brady this year. Tom Brady's threw for picks that he never throw for in New England, like, barring the AFC divisional game against the Titans, where it was a really cold game, and, it happens sometimes. You do get a pick six. Russell Wilson gets pick sixes. Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, the list goes on and on. It doesn't matter how good you are, pick sixes happen. But, like, I just found it astounding that everyone chose to discard the 90% of really good play by Jameis Winston, which is on tape. 90% of the time he was phenomenal. 10% of the time he was this dumpster fire. But at the same time, I'd argue that he's more of a sure thing than both of these quarterbacks. And let's say you put Jameis in Chicago right now. A, I'd argue they're a Super Bowl contender. And B, I think they blow teams out with that defense. I really do. Especially with a guy like Matt Nagy, who, credit to him, the offense is doing just enough with the level of quarterback play to win games. And I can't appreciate that highly enough based on the quarterback play when we're touching on the Bears. But I don't know how you feel about that. Like, you just plug and play in that system in Chicago. I'd argue that the Bears should be 5-0 right now. We'd probably be talking about them in the same sense as a Seattle and a Green Bay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we can't, understate enough just the job that Matt Nagy is doing in Chicago. Obviously, one-time coach of the year, so he's well respected amongst his peers. And the fact he's managed to drag his team to this 4-1 record despite the quarterback play, and obviously it goes back to the I'm a firm believer in the old adage of defenses win championships. But that's only going to come true if you actually have at least average quarterback play, which probably that the Bears aren't really going to get at the moment, and that's what they would get with Winston. Like, there's a reason why obviously there's plenty more tape we can dive into him now, but there's a reason why he went number 1 overall those years ago, because the raw talent was there, and then obviously he needs the right coaching, and he needs to have the right weapons and so on. But yeah, you just love to see a Jameis Winston tossing the ball to Allen Robinson. Like what match that would be. Like
I think it would be the perfect match in Chicago.
yeah.
I really would. Honestly, like if you look at his skill set, okay, he might turn the ball over a bit, but wouldn't you rather have a quarterback who can throw it down the field than have Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky? Like real talk. Like we're seeing as we're still on the Bears and Bucks, like that. My biggest takeaway is I will not take the Chicago Bears seriously as a threat to the NFC title until they get a better quarterback than either Trubisky or Foles. That was my biggest takeaway from the game last night because their defense phenomenal. Tampa's defense is also really, really, really good. Like I think Vita Vea is probably the best nose tackle in the NFL now. The way he bull rushes as well as his rushing defense, I think, is phenomenal. Their linebacker core, their secondary is young, but it looks like a really, really good secondary. It really does. So credit to the defensive side of the ball to Tampa. But I think it's just a story of two failed offenses in this game before we move on. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yes, exactly. It's, everything revolves around the defense. Like you kind of think, you see what the Bears are doing right, and they can ride this defensive wave for a while. I think it'd be interesting to think if they can sort of limp to the playoffs, and then you kind of look at 2021, you sort of see Mitch Trubisky, obviously his option wasn't picked up. I think Foles, they've got they have an option on him to keep him around, but kind of think, oh well, the Bears go and try, what they kind of did when they trade up to get Trubisky, but this time maybe do it right and select, Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields rather than
Trey Lance, yeah,
exactly. There's going to be options there, so they're going to need that upgrade at quarterback to complement the defense.
And before we do finish on with the Bucks, like you said, I don't have any worries about them getting to the playoffs. I think they'll be fine. I think I think their talent level is so high that they will get to a 9 or 10 win team. But like any more than that, and I just don't see them getting any further than divisional round. Maybe if they play the right team, they could get to the championship game, but then that would involve either Seattle or Green Bay losing, and I don't see that happening before the championship game, to be honest with you right now, especially with the way both Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson are playing. Like you said, defense wins championships unless you have one of three quarterbacks behind the line. Unless you have Mahomes, Wilson, or Rodgers, it doesn't matter. You can have any defense out there. Look up, like I know we didn't touch on the Patriots Chiefs game, but just and don't get me wrong, I think Mahomes is otherworldly, and you know how highly I think of Patrick Mahomes. But just look at the way that a guy like Russell Wilson handled the Patriots defense compared to Mahomes.
Yeah.
While we're on these three quarterbacks, I'm basically banging on the Russell Wilson should be the MVP of this league, and the fact that people still aren't like on this bandwagon is ridiculous to me, Luke. Before we move on to your Texans, do you know what I mean? Like every week it'll be Russell Wilson should be MVP. That's it. End of story in my opinion.
Yeah, no, we know sort of looking at last year how good it's been. Obviously they're now missing Dante Hightower, for example, this year. He's on the COVID reserve list, opting out, but still a fairly decent unit. And they
still say it's an elite team. I still say it's an elite defense.
Exactly. And they showed that there is a way to stop Mahomes and to stifle him. And if it wasn't the fact that Brian Hoyer had a couple of brain farts and sort of gave the ball away in crucial situations, then they actually stood him through a couple of picks as well. Like the patch, there's so many opportunities to be watching that game. Think, they should win this. They should win this. But obviously the Chiefs, they do what they do. They find a way to win the game, and on they march. So it's kind of like you see that there is that kind of weakness on the Chiefs side of things that you haven't necessarily seen with the Packers or the Seahawks, with Rodgers and Wilson. Just what they're doing in the moment is incredible. They look unbeatable.
Before Bills fans jump on me, Josh Allen's been incredible too. Thank God I have Josh Allen in my fantasy football team alongside Russell Wilson. Is all I'm going to say. I'm beating everyone.
11.5. Jeez.
Luckily, the league I'm in's 2 QB, so there's no dilemma there. There's no dilemma. It's a W every week for me.
Just roll them both out. Yeah, that's 60 points guaranteed.
So let's move on to what I think is the biggest news of this week. I thought it was the most unexpected news. Bill O'Brien has been fired. They saw your campaign on Twitter, and not 2 days afterwards, Bill O'Brien was gone. What I'm going to say is, Luke, kudos to you for starting that campaign. And number two, as a Texans fan, how do you feel going into this week? Obviously, you're not going to implement a head coach by the time the game comes round, a permanent head coach anyway. So, yeah, how do you feel on the whole?
Yeah, as I say, just touching on that Twitter campaign, I didn't anticipate it would only last 2 days, so that was quite a treat. So that saved me a fine off that tweet day after day. But yeah, I mean, it's, as you said at the top there, it was quite a surprise that in the timing, if it needed to happen, despite the 0-4 start, you kind of had the impression that Bill O'Brien was sort of untouchable in the position he was. But along comes Cal McNair, the owner, and he's fired. So it's like there was kind of been similar situations under the Bill O'Brien reign before, and things have turned around. Everyone talks about the 2018 season where we start 0-3, end the year 11-5 because we cooked up a 9-game win streak. There's other years where we've lost a couple of the opening games, but then we only got as far as the divisional round. There was always that feeling ever since, especially the Watson era, there was always something a bit extra, but it always, for one reason or another, we just got beat, So the fact that we had to rely on the Watson magic to beat Buffalo in 2019, obviously blowing the 21-0 lead to the Chiefs, and that was kind of, everything was in place for O'Brien to take this team. We could, go into Kansas City and shock the Chiefs, and then before you know it, we're in the AFC Championship game. And I think if we did get to the AFC Championship, Bill O'Brien probably still be, head coach of this team. It wouldn't necessarily be 0-4, and he might still be in the position. So, but no, you say, here we are, week 5, hosting the Jags. Romeo Crennel, he's interim head coach now for the rest of the year, age 73, so he's quite easily the oldest head coach in NFL history. But again, I think he was quite an interesting decision. I suppose he's the guy that's been around the organization for a while, so I think ownership, okay, well, he'll be the one to steady the ship.
Steady, yeah.
But trouble, he was he was defensive coordinator last season. That defense was a bit of a disaster last year, and he moved this year. It was kind of we won't fire you, he kind of wants to sort of kind of retire. So let's make up this title and call you the associate head coach. So you'd see him like sat in the stands during games, not sure exactly what he was doing, or who he was speaking to, or who was kind of giving some guidance to the new Anthony Weaver, the new defensive coordinator. But you kind of felt that was Crennel's he was in quite a cozy position there. Probably there last a year or two, and then probably would announce his retirement. But now he's sort of thrust into the head coaching role and trying to resurrect this season. He's already come out and said that this is a playoff caliber roster, and he's going to do all he can to get the team back into the playoffs this year.
Well, he's not wrong, in my opinion. I think it is a playoff caliber roster. I also think it helps that the AFC South is wide open and that the Titans should be excommunicated from the league, but that will come later. Well, touching on the Texans, and my view from the outside is Bill O'Brien, the coach, in my opinion, and I think very highly of Bill O'Brien as a coach. I think he started to lose credibility as a coach because of his GM duties, and we saw that with the reports that JJ Watt confronted him, and they had a bit of a shouting match, to put it nicely. I think it all stems back. If you look at this Texans franchise, it all stems back from really trading Dwayne Brown. I think that's where the problem started with this franchise. And then you look chronologically, obviously you follow them a lot more in depth, and you always have these like star players who, like a Dominique, DeAndre Hopkins should never be traded in the history like of NFL football. Like this is a guy that you pay whatever it takes to keep into us in your franchise. You know, this is a legit like a guy who you'll know better than me. I don't think there's been there's ever been any character issues with him. You know, I think everyone who's been his teammate has only said really positive things about DeAndre Hopkins. Even on the Arizona side, you never hear anything negative about him. So with that, with the Texans, I think it was a move that needed to be made because I think he lost credibility with the players. But where do you go now? Because now you have to start two searches in effect. You have to start a search for a GM and you have to start a search for a head coach. I'd argue that the GM job is more important because they should decide, who the head coach is. But who would you go for, let's say, for the general manager job? Because, there are names out there. There are, assistant GMs that might. I think the Texans job, lack of first round picks next year aside, I think it's a very interesting job because you have Deshaun Watson, you have Laramie Tunsil. The defense I still think is good. I think there's still playmakers on the offensive side of the ball alongside Deshaun. Personally, I'd be very like if that was me in that situation, I'd be interested in this Texans job. I really would because it's a rebuild, but it's not really a rebuild because you have a top 5 quarterback in the house. Like, you know what I mean? You're not far away. Like we've seen it with the Packers, with the Seahawks. Like the Seahawks have rebuilt the past 3 years, but it's not even been a rebuild because they made the playoffs basically every year. It's not a rebuild. And now the Seahawks are finally back in contention. The same thing with the Packers. The same thing happened with Aaron Rodgers. It's what happens when you have a top 5 quarterback. You can rebuild on the fly. You'll get lucky with draft picks here or there, like, a DK falling to the 64th pick or the Packers signing Za'Darius and Preston Smith and, stuff like that. It will happen. Luck will fall where everything plays out right. And you get these types of players. So I say all that to say, who would be your favorite for the GM job right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of options out there. It's hard to kind of pinpoint a name. We kind of think hopefully a few people would be queuing up because it's not a rebuild in the sense that, okay, well, we need to go find ourselves the next franchise quarterback. We've got issues all down the field. I think it should be like a really interesting project. So you kind of think, well, whoever comes in, they're going to be given time because we don't want to start, bringing a guy for a year or two, then get rid of him. Like that's not how to fix things. Obviously, there's a huge, there's a lot's been going on in the background of this team, like sort of ever since going back to sort of November 2018 when it kind of things really started moving. Because that's when the former owner Bob McNair passed away, and it kind of created this kind of power vacuum sort of situation. You kind of retrospectively kind of asking, was there ever kind of a full succession plan in place? Obviously, his son Cal McNair kind of assumed the owner duties. So it was him, owner of the team. And then at that time in November 18, we had Brian Gaine. He was the general manager in his first season, and at that point in time, Bill O'Brien was the head coach only. And, things were going relatively okay in 2018. Obviously, it was the 0-3 season and ended up 11-5. So okay, well, there was issues, but they were fixable. And then it was the kind of the beginning of 2019 is where things started kind of, cracks, not necessarily cracks appearing, but you kind of feel like, well, the key players, they're moving into position. So Brian Gaine, he was the general manager, he was dismissed prior to the start of 2019 season. In comes Chris Olsen to be interim general manager. He was previously the senior vice president of football administration. So it was a fairly natural transition, but this was never the long-term plan. Like the shifting of power was, moving apace. The key figures were placing themselves, and in reality, like those in positions of power were just the two names who, have kind of really been thrown in the limelight since Bill O'Brien was fired. So it's Bill O'Brien himself, and then it was senior vice president of team development Jack Easterby, who's now the interim GM since O'Brien was dismissed. So 2019 season, again, for the most part, was a success. Reached a divisional round, obviously it completely fell apart with getting blown up by the Chiefs. So, and then along comes the 2020 season. it's pretty much confirmed that Bill O'Brien is now this czar-like general manager, head coach, and Jack Easterby is promoted to executive vice president of football operations. So you have these two guys, running the show. Obviously, the biggest personnel decision was the trading away of DeAndre Hopkins. That we've mentioned that time and time again. So obviously that was you look at the draft, for example. There was no first round pick because of the trading to get Tunsil from Miami and Kenny Stills as well. So the Texans had to wait until pick. We had pick 40 where Ross Blacklock came along, but the more everyone saw the clip when the Texans on the clock at number 90, where we had images beaming into our front room of Bill O'Brien, sat in his war room, and there's him slamming down the phone, like shouting at someone off camera. You think, what's going on here? This guy is clearly, not quite unstable. So it sort of became knowledge in the coming days that apparently the Detroit Lions are backed out of a trade, which obviously visually left Bob raging and shouting at someone. But you kind of think, well, these kind of things happen all the time. You think during a draft, like there's going to be hundreds of phone calls, mountains of trades, potential trades. You kind of think, just take them the chin. There's no need to be slamming phones and shouting at people. So in the end of the pick, Texans, we take Jonathan Greenard, linebacker out of Florida State. Looked quite impressive on tape, but it was pretty clear O'Brien just didn't want this pick. It's ultimately been proved by the fact it didn't take until the last game against the Vikings for Greenard to actually appear on the field. So just like, okay, there's something not right here. And then later on in the draft as well, I think the Texans, they moved up to pick 126. We traded with the Rams. We gave them 136. And then our 7th round picks, 248, 250th overall. And then with that pick, we've taken Charlie Heck, offensive tackle, who was, he was widely considered to drop another 10 picks. The Texans could have just picked him anyway. But so it kind of feel like O'Brien almost just didn't want to draft. He was kind of bored, like that kind of aspect of general management didn't interest him. He said, okay, I'll just give away all these picks. I'll just get this guy that I want, and that'll be the end of it. So I think he tried to justify this kind of draft technique by describing 2020 season as a veteran year. So it's we don't need to rely on rookies. We're going to get all these veterans in. Now we're going to get Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, David Johnson, and things are going to be absolutely fine. But as the season's played out, ultimately proved that veteran year or not, it hasn't worked out. So now we've had these reports surfacing that Bill O'Brien lost the locker room now as soon as the week 2 loss to the Ravens. So obviously JJ Watt having the bust up. So he's obviously seen this as real, alpha male in the locker room, and ultimately led to a kind of a player revolt. So you kind of now we're sort of on with this knowledge, you kind of think, well, that week 4 loss to the Vikings was always going to happen. Like no, there's no belief in that coaching staff. So off Bill O'Brien went. So now all that's left is Cal McNair, owner, Jack Easterby, interim GM. Now, a lot of Texans faithful saying that Easterby needs to be jettisoned as well, because it's already been confirmed he won't get the full-time job. So kind of there's hope there that he'll be moved on after the 2020 season. But because this guy is long seen as Bill O'Brien's right-hand man. He played a key role in all the trades and the personnel decisions, and things like what we touched on in the episode last week, the egregious contract handed to Whitney Merciless. So you kind of think there's a lot's got to change in this background. So the appointment of the GM will take place first. The team have confirmed. So once that general manager is in place, they'll form part of the search committee for the next head coach. So whoever that general manager ultimately is, they're going to have a raft of options to be the next head coach of the Houston Texans from 2021 onwards.
Do you know who I'd like to be the Texans head coach, now that we're on the topic? A guy who has been often linked with the Cowboys, a guy who is in the next state over coaching football, college-wise. I'd love to see Lincoln Riley take a hold of that team. That would be my number one option if I was a GM. I'd go to Lincoln. I'd be like, how much money do you want to coach Deshaun Watson at the next level? I really would, He's young. He plays a really fun brand of football. He's a really good coach. He seems like a really good manager, but not in like a college way, but in an NFL way. Like if you listen to all his guys coming into the NFL, they all talk about how they treat him as men, not as like kids, like some coaches do, which is why they don't succeed at this level. That would be my number one pick. I don't know how you feel about who you'd want to be the next Texans head coach. I'd go for Lincoln Riley or Eric Bieniemy. Those would be my number one, number two options right now. Again, Eric Bieniemy deserves to be a head coach in this league. But at the same time, I don't know. There's just something. I've seen Lincoln Riley be a head coach. I know it's at the college level. So that would be my number one choice. But like Eric Bieniemy again, I'd say there are probably like 15 head coaches who should be fired, and Eric Bieniemy should get their jobs in the NFL. But I digress. I don't think you'd be disappointed with either of those people as your head coach, would you?
No, there's kind of this sort of two schools of thought. And it's like, do we get an experienced guy, someone who's been in the league a while, or do we pluck someone out of the college game? So touching on the two names you mentioned, obviously Lincoln Riley, working QB wonders, Oklahoma, produces these two back-to-back Heisman winners in Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. So that doesn't happen. Those sort of things shouldn't happen really. So it's quite incredible what he's done there. So there's no reason why, you can see why he's being linked with a vast variety of NFL coaching gigs, and it feels like it's just a matter of time before he does come to the league. Eric Bieniemy, he's been linked with, I was so surprised in the round of coaching hires entering this season that no one picks him. I know he was interviewed, but ultimately he's elected to stay, whether it's his choice or the team still want to hire him. But he's going to have, from looks of things, one more year in Kansas City because his contract is up at the end of this season. So kind of think, well, it's going to be one last Super Bowl run with Andy Reid, Mahomes, Bieniemy before he probably moves on. So the team have confirmed that Romeo Crennel, he's going to stay in the position till the end of the season. So it kind of feels like the team have already said, okay, well, we're prepared to wait until 2021. So kind of thinks the teams are positioning themselves to get Bieniemy in. There's also talk of Josh McDaniels, and obviously the continuous connection with the Texans Patriots, how they're trying to so Jack Eastby was a former Patriots staffer himself, so he's quite chummy with Josh McDaniels. But again, I don't think McDaniels is really a guy I kind of like. He's had a sort of
an excellent coach, excellent.
So, and then lastly, a guy I don't know how likely this is, but if we could get Dabo Swinney and Deshaun Watson's coach from college, that'd be unbelievable. Like reunite those guys. I think that's what we need. Watson to find that spark, find that magic again. Why what he did in Clemson, why can't you just repeat that with Texans? So any one of those, either Bieniemy, Dabo Swinney, Lincoln Riley, sign me up.
I'll give you a wild card option, just because I've been honestly, like, it's not even jokes. I am of the mindset that Brian Schottenheimer will get a head coaching job in the NFL next year.
Yeah,
and it is a shame because you know me, if anyone's followed me a long time on Twitter, they would know that I was not a fan of the Brian Schottenheimer hire because I thought it was just another guy that would enable Pete Carroll to run the ball a lot. Now that you finally let Brian Schottenheimer develop with Russell Wilson, that relationship where like you got that quote where he says, like, because for people that don't know, Brian Schottenheimer's headset stopped working in the middle of the game last week against Miami. So basically it was Russell Wilson calling the plays for the second half by himself, which obviously we know how that happened, how that ends. Russell Wilson scores 2 touchdowns, no big deal, continuation. But I think it shows just how on sync they are, that Brian Schottenheimer started talking about desserts with his other coaches up in the skybox when that happened. So that's a guy who I think will get a lot of head coaching buzz, and I think he deserves it. Like, seriously, I think he deserves it. The way he's run an offense, the way he incorporates like guys like Freddie Swain, who people have never heard of until he got drafted in the 6th round by Seattle, and he seems to be a real gem. I really think, real solid find at the end of the sixth. The way that like he has this relationship with his guys on offense, like no one talks badly about him. So I could see that being another, a wild card option for the Texans. I think that's a guy who's going to get a ton of interviews as well, especially if the Seahawks continue being this dominant offensively. I don't know how you feel about that one. I just wanted to throw that name at you as well. Seeing how there are comparisons made all the time between Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson, especially when Deshaun was entering the draft. I think he's probably the most Russell Wilson type quarterback I've seen enter the draft since Russ. How do you feel about that? Maybe being a continuation of what he did in Seattle with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be another, a good high. You sort of seen, obviously, he's kind of, slowly kind of like led himself into this position. Obviously, he's got the history of quarterback coaching at Georgia, and he came to the NFL with the Colts, and obviously been at Seattle now since 2018. So, yeah, I mean, definitely an interesting proposition. Obviously, it's, as you say, dark horse. It's not really a name you've seen mentioned much, and I'm not sure if he's been interviewed for for head coaching roles before, but
he has not.
Okay. Well, there you go. You kind of see these coordinators kind of in a sort of like 2-3 year kind of cycle, and if they're producing winning seasons, if they're getting their playoff wins under their belt, and if they're winning championships, and there's only be a matter of time before they get head coaching buzz. So interesting, because obviously it's going to be, the Texans aren't going to rush this head coaching hire, so you kind of may see as the season progresses, as other teams inevitably going to be searching for their next head coach as well. So we can have some competition if other teams are going to be in for Eric Bieniemy or Lincoln Riley. We're going to need other options, and Schottenheimer is definitely an option. Can't rule them out.
We'll end the chat for the main podcast now. For those of you that don't know, Franchise Sports Talks Football is going overtime. We're calling it FSTFOT. Basically, guys, our episodes, for people listening on the main podcast, our episodes will be going about 40 to 45 minutes on the main. And then on our YouTube channel, there will be an extended edition where we get to touch on all the things that we want to touch on. A bit like Pro Football Talk, but without like the 4.5 hours of Chris Sims. As much as I like Chris Sims, 4.5 hours a day is a bit, it's too much. It really is. So yeah, Luke, just for the podcast crowd who don't want to switch over, and I don't see why they wouldn't, switch over to the YouTube to find the extended version, where can they find your good work?
Yeah, so I have Twitter, Instagram at Conboy NFL, on the .com as well, franchisesports.com/NFL.
And you can follow me at Alen Ramic 03. As I said last week, the Lakers are predominantly taking over my timeline right now, and for good reason. We're one win away, and I'm unapologetic about that, like completely unapologetic.
Could end the podcast without mentioning that.
Oh no, you see the purple and gold jerseys behind me. You can't. So thank you so much for listening to the main podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Please be sure to switch over to the YouTube account now. You will really love our chat about COVID and whatnot, and we always go off into very interesting tangents. Thanks for listening. Take care. And welcome to FSTFOT for the YouTube crowd that have maintained listening all the way through. Luke, the biggest thing I want to touch on here is just the whole COVID situation. For me, it seems like it's one team. Obviously, odd players aside, you can't really avoid the odd players aside. It will happen. Like, it was bound to happen, especially with the NFL not taking like a bubble route like the NBA took. If they're at their homes, we've seen it in the Premier League in England. Players are bound to get COVID. Like, it will happen just naturally. I think the NFL on a whole's done a really good job with maintaining it and, sort of like just killing it at its bud where it needed to. Like, we've seen the Vikings, they went through all that protocol, and then they played last week against your Texans, obviously. We saw the Patriots, even though Cam Newton got COVID, they played against the Chiefs on Monday, and then they'll play again on Monday. I just want to say, I am disgusted by the Tennessee Titans. Like, you've known the risk going into this year. You know we're in the middle of a pandemic still. You're not enforcing mask rules, which I think is ridiculous. Like the fact that that story is coming out now. B, you're having workouts, even though your players have COVID, like secret workouts that aren't supposed to be happening, but they get leaked anyway. Do it in a private facility where no one can film you, you idiots. And B, don't do it. Like, just don't. I honestly can't believe the stupidity of the Tennessee Titans. And I could easily see them not playing this game on, well, now what's Tuesday evening? Like, this is crazy. I've never seen this before, like in any sports league. Like, we saw it like in MLB where teams were quarantined, but you didn't see them getting more positives after the fact. They quarantined, they were in lockdown, and then they came back and played. Why are the Titans incapable of doing this? Like, I don't get it.
It's quite unbelievable how the Titans are essentially getting away scot-free with this. Like they've, at first, when they had the first couple of cases, you think, okay, well, this happens. You can quarantine as much as you can, wear a mask all the time. But you're always going to get 1 or 2 cases. With any team, you think, okay, well, fine. We'll take it on the chin. We can work around this. But when you get what we've seen in Tennessee, which is an outbreak, you kind of think, okay, well, there's something clearly, amiss here. And obviously, report serves in that the offense are holding, illegal workouts on a high school field of all places. So it's the fact that the other teams are having to kind of just look at the Bills example. The fact that they don't even know if they're going to practice today because they don't know when the next game is going to be. Because you kind of think, well, they've been planning to play the Chiefs of all teams, arguably the best team in the league, on a Thursday night. So they think, okay, there's a lot of prep's going to go into this. And all of a sudden, that game's been moved. They're now going to be playing the Titans on a Tuesday night, which is, NFL on the Tuesday night. That doesn't happen. And it's just the fact that it's just having this knock-on effect. And it's all because of one team. And the fact that they're not being, charged like draft picks or having to forfeit games is quite incredible. And the fact that they've already moved their bye week. The Steelers and Ravens already changed their schedules to their bye weeks and moved and so on. So it's quite incredible. Why aren't the Titans being punished further? I just don't understand that. Really, I don't.
We saw fines for coaches not wearing masks on the sidelines, and I'm not being funny. If everyone's tested negatively, and I understand now what's happening with the Titans, Pete Carroll or John Gruden or someone having their mask down here when they're trying to talk to the team is not the end of the world. Like, realistically, they should be wearing the masks at all times. But I think the fines were too harsh. I really do. I think it's ridiculous to be fining these people just for lowering their masks. They should be wearing them. I'm not an anti-mask guy by any means. You know me, I'm in the scientific field, so please, everyone wear your mask when you're outside. But when you're in a situation where people are testing every day and you're coming up negative, realistically, if you don't break that bubble, you don't really need to wear a mask because no one around you has got COVID, and you shouldn't have COVID either. So the mask is to prevent you spreading it to other people. It's not to prevent you getting it per se. But there's not been any big fines. I'm talking in the millions of dollars for the Titans is beyond me right now. B, I think they should have been made to forfeit this game against the Bills.
Yeah,
I understand there's TV revenue and you don't want to have to forfeit a game, but it's not fair on the Bills, in my opinion. It's not fair on the Chiefs having to move their game. I mean, I bet the Chiefs will prefer it because it means they get to play on a Sunday instead of a Thursday evening, so it's not like a shortened week for them. So I understand why the Chiefs wouldn't mind per se, but you build a schedule though, don't you? As a coaching staff, you build a schedule of how you want to build into that game on a Thursday evening, and now that's all been messed up for them. I can't believe in 2020, with all the information that we have, with how serious we should be taking this, that there's an NFL team. It's not individual people anymore. It's an entire team isn't taking this seriously. And like you said, I think they need to take at least a first round pick away from them. I really do. I feel like you're endangering people's lives.
That's how you hit the pockets of these teams. You can find them, thousands or millions, wherever you want. But the fact that how you're going to really affect this team is by taking away draft picks, we're taking away, the future of this team, because how else are they going to learn? The fact that you're going to find the franchise, that doesn't, that will hit ownership a bit, but it's not going to affect, on-field performance.
No.
They're still going to, have, the first round pick, and they're still going to bring guys in, and ultimately their performance isn't going to drop. So you have to hit, there's got to be performance related fines, or, so it is quite, unbelievable. And the fact, you've seen the Raiders, they've been hit, fines a few times, and the fact that they continue to do it, that basically means, they're okay, well, fine, we can take on the chin. This doesn't ultimately, that's obviously at the moment it's a very rich franchise. So then they just, they've built, the Death Star, as it's been called, out in
it's
Vegas.
a beautiful stadium.
Fantastic stadium. $1 billion has been put into that. It clearly shows, okay, they can put it about a bit at the moment. So the fact that they are flaunting these rules, but you say the fact that every players, staff, everyone are getting tested daily, they keep producing negative results. They do in effect create like a biosecure bubble. It's one of the safest places ultimately on the planet, because
precisely every day you're testing
hundreds of people here, no one has tested positive. So the fact that these guys, it's one thing I never understood, the fact that how this doesn't just go for NFL, the fact that all sports, so you see that, unless you're on the field, everyone is being told to mask up, sanitize and everything whilst they're on the field. You think, well, these guys can compete, face to face. In NFL's case, they can tackle each other and everything. And then they said, oh no, don't shake their hands at the end of the games in case you spread anything. But I'm kind of like, well,
you touch each other more during the game.
I'm not like an anti-mask or anything you say yourself. I think obviously the fact that they've been tested is the ultimate, shows that they're tested daily. So you might, there's obviously been cases of false positive and so on. You might get, I don't know if false negative is a thing, but like the fact that you guys are tested daily goes to show that, okay, that they're not potentially contagious, and they can go about their everyday business within the team, and obviously not affect any other players, any opposition they come up against. So, but yeah, so the Titans clearly haven't followed protocol, and now that's why you kind of think, okay, if the fact that I think the first time today, I think there's been no new cases, so I think they've now gotten on top of it, but ultimately it's far too late. They've already had to, move bye weeks, they've had to move games. Like, you kind of think, at the start of the season, you think, okay, well, you kind of think, well, this probably will happen at some point, but you think, okay, maybe it'll be 1 or 2 games because teams will learn their lessons. But the fact that the league didn't really build in that much flexibility.
No.
Obviously, you saw it in the early on, UK was, easy enough, we can move bye weeks, but as the season goes on, you're going to run out of bye weeks. You're going to run out of
precisely
dates. I think the number, they kept championing the fact, okay, we pushed back the Super Bowl a week later than would have originally been scheduled to kind of build in that extra week's worth of games if we need it. But the fact that they could have done something like, obviously there's a lot of logistical challenges, but possibly extend the season a bit further, perhaps look at double buys, just, give teams that option and flexibility and not be told, 72 hours before you're due to play a game, okay, this, you're going to be now going to be playing a different team, and you're going to be playing them 3 days later. Like the logistical side of things like that, especially if road games as well, you kind of feel, okay, well, we're now going to have to sort out transport, to Buffalo, to Tennessee. Like, it's a huge challenge that these teams didn't necessarily have to be presented with, and the fact that there's not been much, whispers coming from any teams saying, okay, this is ridiculous, this is terrible, like, why are we having to cater to this? Like, the fact that they're taking the chin goes to say, well, okay, they're quite understanding of the situation. But say we reach week 10, week 11 of the season, and we have another outbreak of another team, if it's the Titan or someone else again, what's going to happen then?
Precisely. Unless you have like your bye week really late, you're screwed. Like, you are.
It's hard for the team to have like week 12, week 13 buys, but after that, there's going to, and these games, obviously all games matter, but you're going to have that sense of feeling that these games are going to matter even more, because the playoff ramifications are going to be amplified more than ever. And if teams are going to be, you can say quite easily that Buffalo have been quite disadvantaged into this week. In fact, they've had to, cater to the Titans and everything. So if teams if they miss out, by a game or half a game in the playoffs, you think, okay, well, 1 minute we thought we were playing the Chiefs, the next we're playing the Titans. Like, I don't know. Obviously, there's going to be very little grounds. I'm sure the NFL has been quite clever writing into the, the T's and C's of this season that, okay, well, this was, you accepted that the risks and the change we're facing this year. The fact that you've played just 16 games, you need to win, 9 or 10 to get yourself a playoff spot. Just go out and do it. Like, just go out and win games. But it's a huge challenge for all teams. And the fact that one or two franchises are going to let it down for the rest of the league, they're not going to make friends, are they, amongst themselves? So.
I feel like the lack of buzz around the fact that, there's been no punishment yet. I feel like teams know that there is a punishment brewing. Otherwise, I think you would hear a lot more outcry from teams, especially the likes of the Buffalo Bills, the Steelers. Respect to Mike Tomlin for just going, you know what, we're just going to suck it up. We'll just play, football. But it shouldn't be that way. Because if I'm Mike Tomlin, I'm looking at my team and going, well, my team's not got any positive tests. It's not their fault. They've been adhering to all the rules strictly. Like, why can't the other teams do it? And like I've said, as you know, I covered the NBA as well. If you can get LeBron James, who is the biggest athlete in the world, to quarantine in a bubble for over 100 days, you're telling me, if I don't know, name any player from the Titans. You're telling me that you can't isolate in your own house with your family, with your kids, with all, the goods that you have in the world. While the season's got, miss me with that. Like, I'm sorry, miss me with
the fact that the NFL hasn't gone down this biosecure route of like putting the players in a hotel in Disneyland or wherever. So the fact they can spend time and see their friends and family, in the flesh, they should should be really grateful for that. The fact that they can continue to play the sport they love. And you've seen the amount of, there was a fair list of players who have opted out of this season because they wanted to protect their loved ones, which, completely understandable. Like, if I was a player in the league myself and I had potentially vulnerable loved ones and family members, I think, I don't know, let's reevaluate here. There's nothing more important than, the health and well-being of your family. So, kudos to those guys, but that option was there for players. So the fact that I suppose it could be an option for the NFL later down the line if these players didn't want to stay, if hotels were discussed with the NFLPA or anything like that. But if as the season progresses, we're gonna have to start protecting these games. We can't afford to be losing. Can't have these last minute schedule changes again and again. So perhaps when the playoffs roll around, the fact that half the league is going to be eliminated, so they won't be playing more games. Could they potentially look at securing these players somewhere? And the fact that obviously, fair enough, you're going to lose home field advantage and everything like that. But the fact when there's no crowds,
there's no home field advantage anyway.
Is there an advantage? Exactly. So the fact that could you pick maybe 2 or 3 venues to play these playoff games in, like fairly you could say have an east, a west, and a central location to kind of try and make it a fair game. Could you try and have a reasonable, the fact that you could have, for example, let's say the LA team playing someone in Florida. In fact, okay, well you still let's say that the Florida franchise has the so-called home team, then you can play that game in the East Coast venue. The fact that they will still have an advantage because the fact they probably have to travel 2-3 hours, and you having the LA team flying 6 and 7 hours across the country. So there will be that sort of inherent advantage in place. Fair enough, you're not going to play in your own stadium potentially with 20% of your own crowd, but there are ways around it. And if the league is going to get serious and they want to prevent another outbreak, this should be an option to consider.
Well, I agree with you, but I'm hoping by January, there'll be some fans let back in most stadiums. I think we're heading that way. Apart from in England, God bless Boris Johnson. For people listening, I'm joking.
Yeah.
If you follow me on Twitter, you will know my political feelings very clearly. I don't mince my words, as Luke knows.
No, I've seen a petition going around to let fans back in, and it needs to happen. But
and don't get me wrong, sports needs fans. It absolutely does.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's ridiculous that Florida's trying to let in 65,000 people into Hard Rock Stadium.
Yeah,
I think it's absurd. I also really respect the Miami Dolphins for going, we're not doing that. There will be 12,500 people in the stadium for the foreseeable future. Everyone will be socially distanced. It's not happening on our watch. That is to me showing that is a franchise that's incredibly smart.
Yeah.
So respect to the Dolphins. I can't believe I'm saying that the Dolphins as an organization are being incredibly smart after, but credit to Brian Flores and Chris Greer. They've really turned the ship around.
The old Dolphins, don't worry about that.
But I agree with you. But I feel like we've seen it. Like, I know you talk about the hotel to secure the players and whatnot. I think we've seen with the success of, I'd say, 30 other teams in the NFL. Obviously the Patriots had Cam Newton, but obviously that he just got unlucky, I think, because there's no other way of saying that. I think Cam just got unlucky there.
There's going to be one or two cases, no matter how careful you are.
Precisely.
There is still a pandemic going on.
If 30 to, I'd even include the Patriots because it's just Cam Newton and that's it. So it's unfortunate. Actually, the Jets just had a person test positive as well, didn't they? I don't know if you saw the news. Yeah. So there's been 3 teams in the season that have tested positive. Obviously AJ Terrell had that false positive, so I'm not really counting that. That can happen, with the testing. But if let's say 96% of the league can do it, why can't the other 4%? Like, that's my biggest takeaway from this is, if you're the Titans, and I keep on banging this drum, they need to have games taken away from them. They need draft picks and they need big fines.
Exactly. Because it's forfeiture or taking draft picks away. That's how to hit teams hard. In fact, they've sent a blatant disregard for the rules. They've been reportedly hosting illegal practices. Like, punish these teams. Don't just hand out fines and then that's not exactly a
it's a billionaire owners. They don't care.
Exactly. Okay, we'll take some on the chin, but the fact that they've still got a competitive advantage, they've still been able to practice and they've been able to run plays and so on. So they're going to play better whenever they do play the next game, because the fact they've had these extra practices, they've had a bit more, built up chemistry with new members of the team and that kind of thing. So they shouldn't, it shouldn't be allowed. It shouldn't be this way.
Oh, I agree with you, definitely. Touching on the previewing this weekend's games, though, before we do sign off, is there any games that do interest you from a watching standpoint? Obviously, my favorite will be the Seattle Vikings game on Sunday Night Football. I'm very excited to see Russell Wilson cook all over that Vikings team. But yeah, what games are you particularly excited for this weekend?
I'll touch on the very obvious fact of the Texans against the Jags being my.
I didn't want to say anything.
It's obviously the first game of Romeo Crennel leading this team. So, but ultimately expectations are low. I don't know what this team is going to look like. The Jags have shown they can be a bit frisky. Minshew is erratic at best, so he might turn up, he might not. So the fact our run defense is appalling, bordering on non-existent at the moment. You kind of think James Robinson's going to have himself a bit of a game here. So, but again, with all Watson, so the guy can put up 30 points in the blink of an eye. So it's really. I would have picked this game out at the start of the season. Okay, easy win. The Jags, they're quite clearly tanking. They want Trevor, they want Justin Fields, Trey Lance, whoever. They're going to have their pick of quarterback. But now it's like, they've got a few young guys on that roster that can cause headaches. So definitely going to have an eye on that game. Sort of looking up and down the schedule, what other games we've got. One of my preseason, I can't remember if I said that a Super Bowl pick or definitely in the NEC Championship game was the Dallas Cowboys.
Both of our picks.
they've got the Giants this week, so it's the Jason Garrett revenge game. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there. Obviously, the Giants minus Saquon Barkley now, so they've got Devonta Freeman leading that running game.
He looked good last week.
Exactly. I think he's embedded himself into that team, I think. So you kind of think, and obviously Dallas' run defense is not exactly very good either at the moment. So you kind of feel like, oh, that potential breakout game for him. We say Cowboys, they need wins, you know. If it wasn't for the Falcons special teams having a brain fart on a like onside kick and allowed Dallas player to scoop that ball up easily, you know, this Dallas team's in the hole. So you kind of think they should win that game. The Giants, obviously, there's a few question marks now coming up about Daniel Jones' quarterbacking capabilities. Is this really the guy who's going to lead this team for the next 5-10 years? Yeah. So obviously the Giants, no one's really given much of a chance now. Their key piece of Barkley has disappeared. So and obviously who we got? There's plenty of games to pick out. I'd say obviously you got your Seahawks. It's the Vikings on it's Sunday Night Football. You've got having them. So
indeed,
it's been nice to watch them in a bit of prime time. Should be an easy win for them. Now I'm gonna say it and maybe possibly even jinx it, but but yeah, plenty of games on tap. I'm saying we've got the additional Tuesday night game courtesy of the Tennessee Titans as they host the Bills.
My wild card game that I think is going to be a really fun one is the Chiefs Raiders. I really think that's going to be a really fun game. I think Derek Carr's finally looking like a good quarterback in the Gruden system. He's not being super risk avert. He's only being risk avert right now, which helps a lot. I think he's looked really good this year in all seriousness, Derek Carr. And also the Chiefs are the Chiefs, so whatever game they're playing, it's a fun game because you get to watch Patrick Mahomes. Like, realistically, that's what I say. The Packers, I think whenever are the Packers playing, or are the Packers on
bye?
Packers are on a bye this week, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
So Packers aren't playing, so there's no Aaron Rodgers watch this week. The 49ers Dolphins could be quite a close game just because of the 49ers injuries. And hopefully, I don't think we will see Tua yet, but it'll be nice to see Tua soon. Like, that'll be my...
There's talk there. He's going to, if he's getting closer and closer as the weeks roll by, I think I can't wait to see him on the field. I think if it wasn't for his horrific injury, he would have been the number one quarterback, despite what Joe Burrow
think so.
Did. Obviously, that 1 year of LSU, obviously, no denying his talent.
And he looks phenomenal, though, Joe Burrow.
He does, yeah. He really does. I was really excited to see him. So I think, okay, well, he had a great year of LSU. He's only going to kick on further and further. But the fact that Tua had a bit more on tape, there's a bit more about him, I think. So, if I was the franchise picking number one overall, I probably would have taken Burrow with Tua getting injured. But if Tua was fully healthy, he would have been my pick, easy.
I agree. I agree with that. So, but I also think Miami have done the right thing where they're bringing him on slowly.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, they've done the right thing not to rush him because Ryan Fitzpatrick is the ultimate. I can't even call him the ultimate backup because he always finds himself getting the start.
He's a lot better than a backup, but he's just not good enough to be a starting top end QB in the NFL.
I suppose the ultimate bridge quarterback. Let's call him that. He's always the guy. There's always someone. The team's always just drafted someone, or they've just signed someone in free agency. But he's always there, kind of sort of steering the ship, making sure keep the team afloat, and make sure they're not a laughing stock. And then he'll just disappear slowly into the background. Just be like, okay, well, over to you, young guy. You're the next chapter. Lead this team to greatness. And the fact that you see Fitzpatrick on the field, he's having fun. That guy.
Yeah, he is.
Obviously, he's always smiling. He was having a laugh and teasing the opposition. So yeah, it'd be great to see Tua hit the field, and obviously it'd be nice to see if Fitzpatrick does land somewhere else next year. Probably might find himself with the Giants or something. Completely ran off the top of my head, and all of a sudden, if Daniel Jones continues to not exactly progress in the way that Big Blue liked, then he could start starting games for New York and become the umpteenth franchise will start a game for.
I think it's been nice to see Ryan Fitzpatrick have so much fun on the field. Then off the field, coach two are like, "Don't do this. You just be you."
That's field general, isn't it? Like,
so
looking after the young guys. So yeah, it's exciting. I mean, you kind of see, there's a real, I think, just looking up down the rest of the league, there's this kind of real quarterback transition time, which is kind of approaching. Obviously, we touched in our in the audio show about Brady and Breeze. How long have they really got left? We're seeing, we're absolutely seeing them regress. So changing the guard is coming. Guys that like Tua and Burrow are the future.
It's crazy because like you have this crop of really good young players. Like, people don't include Mahomes in it, but Mahomes is in that group of really, really good young quarterbacks because it's you know what I mean? Because it's just like you expect it now from Mahomes. Same thing with Lamar Jackson. Lamar's in his third year. Like, Mahomes is in his fourth year. Deshaun Watson's still a young QB. And then you have this really, really fun group of young quarterbacks. And then you have like the elder statesmen of Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers going, "Yeah, you're still not as good as those guys. Sorry."
You say on Mahomes, you still put him in that young quarterback bracket. He turned 25 this year, so he's still, got use of head.
People just forget. I think people forget.
The precedent that's been set, these guys, like Brady and Breeze, maybe obviously, the argument is still going to be there. Should they still be playing? But, in their early 40s. But the fact that Mahomes should have at least 10 years in front of him still, barring any, touch wood, that, no major injuries. So, yeah, it's exciting. You say, Watson, obviously, Rodgers is going to stick around jail. There's talk that Jordan Love here, he's ready to take his job. But Rodgers is not exactly going to be, usurped anytime
next year. He's not going to be washed up all of a sudden. No. But you know what? Like you said, I think the quarterback position, is probably the healthiest it's been in the NFL in a long, long while.
There's always talk of, achieving sort of quarterback parity. The fact that years gone by, like how it was almost baffling. In fact, how could there not be 32 humans on the planet capable of playing NFL level quarterback position? There was always one or two teams, struggling to find. I take my Texas for example, when 2014, 2015, off the top of my head, featured on Hard Knocks. We had Brian Hoyer against Ryan Mallett going for the quarterback positions. Like, neither of those guys should be starting, and Hoyer's still floating around, and we sort of saw a bit of a disaster he had for the Pats against the Chiefs, where he sort of
it just reaffirms your point.
Timeout, and there's they used up all three, just things like that. I think this guy, obviously, in come Jarrett Stidham, and he threw couple of interceptions, one which wasn't his fault, but obviously the game was on the line, so you had to go long. So, but I guess Newton probably going to be back for the Pats now. The fact that it's just the fact that Pats took the league as a whole took so long to sign Newton, but obviously Cam is the guy in New England, and he's going to be the guy this year, probably even next year as well, until the Pats.
I think he's their long-term QB now. I really do. I think Cam Newton's been good enough in the first. Obviously, he didn't play last week, but in the first few games, I think he's been good enough when New England's going, "This is our guy now. This is our guy for the next 4 or 5 years. We're going to lock him in at the end of the season in a long-term deal. We're going to make sure this is our guy." Because I think his passing ability has been really, really, really phenomenal so far. I think that's been, obviously a lot of focus goes on his rushing play, but I still cannot believe that the Chicago Bears did not want to sign Cam Newton. I can't believe the Chargers passed on Isaiah Simmons because they did not want to sign Cam Newton. I cannot, no disrespect to Justin Herbert. I think Justin Herbert's been really fun since he's been in and I feel like I've been wrong on Justin Herbert, so I just want to throw that out there. If Justin Herbert continues this way, I will have been so wrong, and I apologize, Justin. But he's not in Cam Newton's league. Like, when Cam Newton's playing like this, he is in the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, I really believe that. I think you have Russ, you have Rodgers, you have Lamar, you have so after Russ, Mahomes, Rodgers, Lamar, Cam, Deshaun. I think that's like the top 5, 6.
The key theme of those guys you listed is the fact they are dual threat. They can use their arms and their legs. Like
And
this is just the way the league's going. You need guys
it's
like that.
and I'd argue that just look at the development that Russell Wilson's made as a pocket passer. Like, I'd argue that his pocket presence is probably just as dangerous, if not more now, than his dual playability. Like, he just picks you apart in the pocket now, and it's not bad for a 5'11" guy who can't see over an offensive line, is it? Like, and I'm so glad we had the types of Russell Wilson in the league, because without him, we don't see Kyler Murray go number one. We don't see Baker Mayfield go number one. Kyler Murray's probably playing for the Oakland Athletics last night, getting blown out by the Houston Astros, unfortunately. That's baseball talk. We'll save that. We'll save that for a different show. But yeah, I know we said we go off on a tangent, but I think this has been a really fun tangent to go off. I think the quarterback level, especially the likes of Fields, Lawrence, who I think is number one, like slam dunk. Like, if you even consider anyone else being number one this year, I think you deserve to be fired with your general manager job. I really do. And I like Trey Lance as well. I think those three, I think, are really, really, really good prospects. Obviously, Lawrence being far ahead of the other two. Watch that backfire in my face in 4 years' time. But
I think Trey Lance is an exciting guy to watch. I think, obviously, as you say, without Russell Wilson, there is no Kyler Murray. I think you can sort of say, without Carson Wentz, is there a Trey Lance? So
no, it's a valid point, and I think
North Dakota State seriously as a NFL quarterback breeding ground, but obviously Wentz had his struggles this year, but he's
bounced back. He bounced back against San Francisco. I thought he looked really good.
But the fact that you look at the guys he's thrown to, the fact that like Greg Ward is his number one receiver in the moment, that answers all the
quarterback.
Yeah. So I think that answers any doubts you've got. So I still think, for me, Wentz is a top 10 quarterback easily. So
yeah,
it's an exciting time, and that it took so long for quarterback play to reach this level. The fact that all 32 teams can say this, we have this guy who is NFL level. In fact, obviously you have guys who are better and worse, but you can still, for all of the faults you can pick in guys like Trubisky and Foles, you can still say, well, at least they can start games.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to play great, but you kind of feel, okay, well,
there's no Nathan Peterman starting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no Nathan Peterman, Brian Hoyers, Ryan Mallett's. And this can go on.
like I still think it's egregious that Buffalo tried to replace Tyrod Taylor with Nathan Peterman. Like, that still irks me.
They're still on the playoff run. They still made the playoffs that year. It's just
based on how good Tyrod Taylor was, and they still tried to replace him. Yeah, no. Sometimes franchises can't get out of the way until they hire the right people, can they? Like,
I wonder why Buffalo had this major playoff drought when they, clowning around like that.
When they have a good quarterback making playoffs, and they don't want to play him.
It was probably the best team in that AFC East, and now people have got to take him seriously as, to make it a championship game.
I'd still take the Patriots over him, but that's because I'm a Cam Newton believer more than anything, as you know.
The gap has been closed considerably.
Oh no, it has definitely.
Because obviously it was always the Pats winning. It was always and then it was kind of the rest kind of just scrapping around, trying to get a 500 record, let alone make the playoffs. So it's an exciting time in that.
So touch on the AFC East before we do sign off. You have three really good, really well-run teams, and then you have the Jets.
Yeah.
I cannot believe the Houston Texans fired, and I said I'll touch on this every single week until Adam Gase gets fired. How the hell is Adam Gase still a head coach in the NFL? I do not understand it. I will never understand it. He should not be a head coach. He should not be a coordinator. He should not be anything in the NFL. He is probably the most incompetent guy in the NFL right now. And he has benefited so much from Peyton Manning, and I can't believe that Peyton Manning's basically not played for 5 years, and he's still benefiting from Peyton Manning. I don't understand it. It is the definition of white privilege in the NFL. Adam Gase is that. Like, you have Eric Bieniemy there. You have Eric Bieniemy not get a job last year, and you have Adam Gase head coaching. And people tell me it's a fair league. It is not a fair league, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, man. Insert flamethrower gift. Woo! But yeah, but completely true in everything you say just there. Like, Gase shouldn't be coaching. shouldn't be coordinating. And the fact that, as you say, he's still in the job and Bill O'Brien got fired before he did, you kind of get the feeling that Gase is next, or possibly Dan Quinn down in Atlanta. But come on, Jess, what's going on? You see, just look within your own division, for example. These teams, obviously, the Patriots had, years and years of success, and it's kind of getting to the point where are they really going to skip a beat in terms of, amount of wins they rack up each year? Now Cam Newton's leading. See, Josh Allen's turning a corner. The Bills have got a great defense there. Miami got a great young core. So they had a mountain of draft picks courtesy of my Texans, and we've got our first and second this season.
Two top 5 picks this year.
Going to be quite handy picks. So
could be like the Browns a few years back.
Exactly. So Miami, they're making all the right moves. They're soon going to have Tua leading that offense, and been singing his praises every time they get a chance. So Jets, they're going to be left behind. They're going to be left behind far before they've got to make some serious personnel moves to be considered a competitor.
But with the Dolphins, I would say that if you potentially have 2 top 10 picks, you could probably get Penei Sewell with one and Jamar Chase with the other. And imagine that.
That is just like, do you know what? Can you just make these guys just a favorite now in the AFC East? Like, they're gonna have some.
Jamar Chase, I think, would have been the number 1 receiver in last year's class, in my opinion. That's how good I think Jamar Chase is. And Penei Sewell would have undoubted. And last year was a good tackle class. I think people I know we had our favourites. I think Wirfs has been decent. I think Jedrick Wills has been good. I think Andrew Thomas has been really good. I think even Jackson in Miami has been really, really good for a young.
Becton as well, apparently, probably the only bright spark on the Jets at the moment. But he's
him and George Fant, having these really athletic tackles and then having the middle of an O-line that can't defend anyone. It's great. You sort the blind side out for Darnold, but right in front of him, you can't sort out. It's great. Again, fire Adam Gase when we're on the Jets. But if you're the Dolphins and you're basically set up now to be really, really competitive the next 10 years. I really believe that. Especially if you can get because I don't think there's many holes in the Miami team going forward. I'd probably look the secondary, not so much, because I feel like the secondary they were missing, because obviously I watched them last week against the Seahawks. I don't think there's many holes in that team. I think the linebacker core is really good. Emmanuel Ogbah looked really, really good last week for him. And then I really like Myles Gaskin a lot. I think Myles Gaskin looks like a really, really, really solid starting running back in the NFL. Matt Breida is also a really great number 2 guy to have. You can have much worse number 2 guys in the NFL. Now, when you add Tua to that, I think their O-line's improving. It's a very young O-line, but it's not a bad O-line. And they have a lot of scope to improve on. If you can add 2 blue chippers to that team, of that level, because I think Jamar Chase is, honestly, if I was an NFL team, that would be the first receiver I'd trade up for since Julio.
Yeah. I think, very fair comparison. I think that's exactly what Miami needs. At the moment, they've got Devontae Parker leading that receiving corps, and everyone kind of wrote him off. But
if he's your number 2 receiver, you're happy.
The fact that he's escaped his grasp, he's a decent receiver. Obviously, behind him, you've got that Preston Williams, another young guy. He's shown a bit of promise, I think. But they are, for as good as Parker is, I think he'd make a great number 2 guy, and plug in Jamar Chase. Tua throwing ball to him. Well, no, sorry, with his left hand with Tua, isn't it? But
he is right-handed, so he could do it that way as well.
But the fact that that'd be a match made in heaven. The fact that if that offense can take that extra level, with, as you touched on, solid O-line, Austin Jackson leading the way there on left tackle, and you've got guys in secondary like Kyle Van Noy, Xavier Howard. As they drafted Noah, I can't pronounce this guy's surname. Igbenaji or but everyone knows who I'm talking about. He's shown a lot of promise. I had a first round grade on him personally pre-draft. So they got to say it's the guys like that. Like they got some household names. They've got this young core, and obviously they're going to have to take the next step up because the Bills look like they're going to do it. The Pats aren't going to skip a beat. But I think AFC East is going to be one of the better divisions in the league for years to come. Well, pre-quarter anyway.
Before people attack Luke, it's pronounced Igbegonig. You see, you can't even if you know how to say it. Igbegoni, that's how it's pronounced.
Igbegoni.
So Igbegoni.
No, but Igbegoni. Okay, yeah, I won't forget that one though.
But like, if you look at them currently, they're projected to have the number 4 and number 8 overall pick. I could easily see Jamar Chase fall to like a number 8 type because I could just see people afraid to take a wide receiver that high, even though they shouldn't be because Jamar Chase is ridiculous. And also you could move up with the amount of draft picks they have. You could move up to like a number 5 to go 4 or 5 and pick Sewell and Jamar Chase back to back, which is a scary thought as well.
All this, this draft capital, like you say, they could trade up. They could even trade down and build up more capital for 2022. Or get some more late round picks. They're good. If you have 2 picks in the top 15, you're in such a position of power. You can do absolutely anything. You can use the picks, take Jamar Chase and the best defensive player on the board, or shore up their offensive line a bit more, or trade up and get the very best player, whoever that may be, or you can even trade back and have an extra first round pick in 2022 potentially. So. If the Texans turn it around a bit and if that first round pick becomes, at best though, you're probably talking like mid late teens.
17, 18, yeah. Like
you can forget 24 to 32. It's not going to be a playoff pick. So the Miami, they are if anyone in this league, Miami are enjoying the current season of the Houston Texans.
Oh, you're not though, unfortunately.
I mean, I kind of, it's the whole stage of grief. First, I was angry, but I'm kind of skipping.
You're accepting it now.
I'm approaching acceptance. Like, let's just see what happens. Like,
I think you're excited for
the
next year.
Reset button needs to be hit. O'Brien's gone. Jack Eastby needs to be next. So let's.
He will be. He will be. At least you have some solace there. As soon as the GM's fired, he'll be gone as well.
Yeah, you kind of think hopefully whoever the GM is, we'll bring him in. He'll have his guys in mind. He'll be part of the head coach search committee. So it can only get better.
I just hope you don't take Brian Schottenheimer, but seriously. I hope he somehow flies under the radar for like the next 2-3 years. Then once we get to the end of Pete Carroll, Brian Schottenheimer steps in. That's what I hope happens. I really do. Yeah. I can't believe I'm saying this on like a platform like this, but I am rooting for Brian Schottenheimer to be the next head coach of the Seattle Seahawks.
You got to hear it first.
So, Luke, this extra time's been really fun. This overtime. We've gone down tangents of talking about the QBs. I've really enjoyed this. And this is going to be, for the listeners, this is going to be a staple of every week's podcast from now on. We are going to be recording like this. So you will get the first 45 minutes on wherever you find your podcast, and then the other for however long we go, we'll find on YouTube as well, and you get to see our pretty faces as well, which
Sorry.
let's hope you guys subscribe to YouTube Premium.
On that note,
Luke, just on the last one, just tell people where they can find you one more time so they don't have to scroll back 45 minutes.
So Twitter, Instagram at Conboy NFL. Do hit up franchisesports.co.uk/NFL. So it's not just myself and Alen. There's a bunch of guys on there. So go read their stuff. NFL, baseball, basketball. It's all covered.
Yeah, and I just want to say, apart from in football, I hope it's an LA clean sweep in both baseball and basketball. That's all I'm gonna say.
Enjoy it.
I'm not being a homer at all right now, am I? Thank you guys for listening and for watching on the YouTube. That will take a while to get used to saying. Please stay safe, unlike the Tennessee Titans. Have a great weekend watching the NFL. Take care.